How does a single screenshot turn a therapeutic break into the end of everything? Why did my husband wait so quietly, collecting receipts, while I thought I was just exploring who I could become? When the door finally closed behind me and the petition landed in my hands, I realized the real story wasn't about freedom. It was about what happens when someone documents every secret I thought I could hide. The words came out so smoothly, I almost believed them myself. I think I need a break, Dorian. Just 30 days to find myself again. I was standing in our kitchen, watching him methodically clean his coffee mug at the sink. The evening light filtered through our apartment windows, casting long shadows across the hardwood floors we'd picked out together 3 years ago. Maya was at my mother's house for what I'd told her was a special sleepover with Grandma Rosa, though the real reason was much more calculated. Dorian didn't turn around immediately, his shoulders tensed slightly, the only indication he'd heard me. When he finally faced me, his expression was unreadable. That's what I'd always found frustrating about my husband. Where other people showed emotion, Dorian showed analysis. "A break," he repeated, his voice flat. "From what, exactly?" I'd rehearsed this conversation for weeks, crafting each word to sound spontaneous yet necessary. "From us. From this routine we've fallen into. I feel like I'm disappearing, Dorian. I wake up, go to work at the credit union, come home, help Maya with homework, watch Netflix, and go to bed. Rinse and repeat. I'm 33 years old, and I feel like I'm already dead inside." He leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "And you think 30 days away will fix that?" "I think 30 days of self-discovery might help me figure out who I am when I'm not just Dorian's wife or Maya's mom, or the loan officer at First Community Credit Union." I let a tremor creep into my voice. "Don't you want me to be happy?" It was a masterful manipulation, and I knew it, framing my need for space as his responsibility to support, making him the villain if he said no. "Where would you stay?" he asked. "I've been looking at some extended stay places. Nothing fancy, just somewhere quiet where I can think." This was partially true. I had looked at extended stay hotels, though my real plan involved spending most nights elsewhere. Dorian studied me for what felt like an eternity. His dark eyes, the ones that had first attracted me at a data security conference 7 years ago, seemed to be processing information I couldn't see. 30 days, he said finally. 30 days, I confirmed, relief flooding through me. "And Maya?" "She can stay with my mom. Rosa loves having her, and it'll give you time to focus on your work without worrying about pickup schedules." He nodded slowly. "When do you want to start this break?" "Tomorrow." I tried to sound hesitant, like the timing wasn't something I'd been planning meticulously. "I know it's sudden, but I think if I wait, I'll lose my nerve." "Tomorrow," he agreed. That night, as I packed my suitcase, I felt giddy with anticipation. Freedom was less than 12 hours away. I'd been suffocating in this marriage for months, maybe years. Dorian was a good man, reliable, financially stable, an excellent father, but he was also predictable to the point of boredom. When was the last time he'd surprised me? When had he last made me feel desired, wanted, alive? I was so focused on my packing that I almost forgot about my iPad charging on the nightstand. At the last second, I grabbed it and tossed it into my bag. I'd need something to keep me entertained during my journey of self-discovery. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have known, was that my iPad was synced to our home network. Every app I downloaded, every account I created, every message I sent would be automatically backed up to the cloud storage system that Dorian, in his role as a data broker specializing in identity theft tracking, had set up to protect our family's digital footprint. I also didn't know that Dorian had spent the last 3 weeks noticing things. The way I'd started working out more frequently, how I'd bought new clothes and started wearing makeup to the gym, the secretive way I'd been guarding my phone, the distant look in my eyes when he tried to initiate intimacy. Most importantly, I didn't know that my husband, the the man I'd dismissed as emotionally unavailable and boring, was about to demonstrate exactly how thorough and methodical he could be when properly motivated. I kissed him goodbye the next morning, a peck on the cheek that felt more like a business transaction than an expression of love. "I'll call you in a few days," I said, "just to check in." "Take care of yourself, Iseult," he replied, using my full name instead of the Izzy he'd called me for years. I should have recognized the formality as a warning sign. Instead, I walked out of our apartment, feeling like I was walking into the first day of my real life. By noon, I was settled into my extended stay suite across town. By 2 p.m., I'd downloaded Tinder, Bumble, and Hinge. By 4 p.m., I'd created profiles on all three, carefully crafting my bio to read, "Recently separated and exploring new connections, looking for someone who knows how to have fun." By 6 p.m., I had 17 matches and was already planning my first coffee date. What I didn't see was the notification that popped up on Dorian's computer at exactly 4:17 p.m. New app installation detected on Iseult's iPad, Tinder, followed by another at 4:23 p.m. Bumble, and another at 4:31 p.m. Hinge. I didn't see him take his first screenshot at 6:45 p.m., capturing my Tinder profile with its recently separated status and carefully selected photos that showed just enough cleavage to attract attention. I was too busy swiping right to notice that my husband had just begun building what would become the most comprehensive documentation of infidelity in our county's family court history. The first week of my break felt like awakening from a coma. Every morning, I'd wake up in my extended stay suite and feel a rush of possibility. No one expected me anywhere. No one needed me to pack lunches, or mediate homework disputes, or pretend to be interested in quarterly budget reports. I'd transformed myself into someone new. Gone was Iseult, the responsible loan officer, replaced by Izzy, the free spirit who wore yoga pants to coffee shops and flirted with strangers at the grocery store. My dating app notifications had become a constant source of validation. Dozens of men telling me I was beautiful, interesting, worth pursuing. The coffee date started immediately. Marcus, a real estate agent with perfectly styled hair and a BMW. Trevor, a personal trainer who complimented my dedication to fitness and suggested we work out together sometime. James, an architect who spent 2 hours telling me about his vision for sustainable housing while I pretended to care about green building materials. But it was Grant Kessler who caught my attention in a way that surprised me. I'd first noticed Grant at my gym months before the break, though I'd never had the courage to approach him while wearing my wedding ring. He was the property manager for the building, which meant he had legitimate reasons to be everywhere. Checking on maintenance issues, coordinating with vendors, ensuring the facilities ran smoothly. He was 39, with the kind of rugged handsomeness that came from actual physical work rather than carefully curated Instagram posts. Our first chance encounter happened on day 3 of my break. I was struggling with the lap pull-down machine when he appeared beside me, tool belt around his waist, explaining that he was there to adjust the cable tension. "Mind if I show you the proper form while I'm here?" he asked, his hand briefly touching my shoulder. "I notice you're here almost every day, but you're not getting the full benefit of the movement." I should have realized that a property manager wouldn't typically provide personal training services. I should have questioned how he knew my workout schedule so precisely. Instead, I was flattered by his attention and the way his hands guided my arms through the correct motion. "Much better," he said, standing closer than strictly necessary. "You've got great natural strength. Most people don't commit to their fitness the way you do." We talked for 20 minutes. He mentioned that he'd noticed I wasn't wearing my wedding ring anymore, and I found myself explaining about my separation, my need for space, my journey of self-discovery. He listened with the kind of focused attention I hadn't received from Dorian in years. "It takes courage to prioritize your own happiness," he said. "A lot of people stay trapped in situations that aren't serving them because they're afraid of change. By the end of the conversation, we'd exchanged numbers. By that evening, we were texting. Grant, hope you don't mind me saying this, but talking to you was the highlight of my day. Me, mine too. It's nice to meet someone who actually listens. Grant, your husband must be crazy to let someone like you slip away. Me, maybe we just weren't right for each other. I'm learning that sometimes people grow in different directions. Grant, his loss is definitely going to be someone else's gain. The flirtation was intoxicating. Grant had a way of making me feel seen, appreciated, desired, in ways I'd forgotten were possible. Our text conversation stretched late into the night, covering everything from our favorite movies to our deepest fears about the future. What I didn't know was that every message was being automatically backed up to the cloud storage system Dorian monitored. Every "good morning, beautiful" text and "can't wait to see you again" message was being systematically screenshotted and filed away. By the end of my first week, Dorian had accumulated 127 screenshots of dating profiles I'd viewed, 14 detailed conversation threads from various apps, and a comprehensive log of my text exchanges with Grant. He'd also begun cross-referencing my location data, information freely available to him as the account holder on our shared phone plan, with the timestamps on my messages and photos. The data told a story I thought I was keeping secret. Coffee dates that ran long were followed by hotel check-ins I'd booked using our shared credit card. Self-care spa days were actually afternoon meetings with matches who lived across town. My carefully curated social media posts about finding inner peace were being uploaded from locations that corresponded exactly with Grant's work schedule at various properties around the city. Meanwhile, I was falling deeper into my fantasy of reinvention. Grant and I had progressed from coffee dates to lunch meetings to evening drinks. He had a way of creating intimacy through shared secrets, telling me about his unhappy marriage, his dreams of starting his own property management company, his belief that we'd found something special together. "I've never connected with someone the way I connect with you," he told me during our second week, his hand covering mine across a restaurant table. "It's like we're perfectly matched." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that this connection was real, that I'd found someone who truly understood me, that my marriage to Dorian had been holding me back from experiencing this kind of passion. "I feel the same way," I admitted. "Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if we'd met first." "Maybe we met exactly when we were supposed to," he said. "Maybe you needed to go through everything else to be ready for this." That night, I updated my dating profiles to be more explicit about my availability. "Separated and ready for something real," I wrote. "Looking for a genuine connection with someone who isn't afraid of commitment." What I didn't see was the notification that appeared on Dorian's screen at 11:47 p.m. Profile updated on Tinder, Bumble, and Hinge, followed by 3 more screenshots added to his growing digital archive. I also didn't see the email he sent to his attorney at 12:15 a.m. "Need to schedule a consultation. Urgent family matter. Available tomorrow morning." I was too busy texting Grant about our plans for the weekend to notice that my husband had just taken the first official step toward ending our marriage. By the 3rd week of my break, I'd stopped pretending this was about self-discovery. Grant and I were seeing each other almost daily, and what had started as emotional connection had evolved into something much more intense. We'd graduated from public coffee shops to private hotel rooms, from cautious flirtation to explicit planning for a future together. "I've been thinking," Grant said as we lay in bed at the Marriott downtown, "about what happens when your 30 days are up." I traced patterns on his chest, feeling more alive than I had in years. "What do you mean?" "I mean, are you really going back to him? To that life you were so desperate to escape?" The question hung in the air between us. I'd been avoiding thinking about the end of my break, too caught up in the intoxication of feeling wanted and desired to consider the practical implications. "I don't know. I admitted. Part of me thinks maybe this break will help Dorian and me reconnect, but another part of me wonders if I'm just kidding myself. Grant rolled onto his side, studying my face with an intensity that made my heart race. You know what I think? I think you already know what you want. You're just afraid to admit it. He was right, and we both knew it. I'd already mentally moved out of my marriage. The only question was whether I had the courage to make it official. What about your wife? I asked, though I'd been carefully avoiding thinking about Marta Kessler, the woman whose husband I was sleeping with. Marta and I have been over for years, he said, the same line he'd been using since our first hotel encounter. We're just going through the motions at this point. She knows something's changed. I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him, because the alternative, that I was destroying 2 marriages for something that might not last, was too devastating to consider. That afternoon, I made a decision that felt both terrifying and liberating. I updated my dating profiles one more time, this time being completely honest about my intentions. Ending my marriage and ready for something real. Not interested in games or casual hookups, looking for my person. I also started making practical plans. I researched apartments in Grant's neighborhood, calculated how much I'd need for a security deposit, and began mentally dividing up the possessions Dorian and I had accumulated over 7 years of marriage. What I didn't realize was that my digital confidence was providing Dorian with the exact evidence he needed to destroy me in court. The dating app algorithms, designed to encourage engagement, had been tracking my behavior with scientific precision. Every profile I viewed, every message I sent, every photo I uploaded was timestamped and logged. When Dorian's attorney subpoenaed the platforms for my complete account history, they discovered something that would prove devastating. I'd created my first dating profile 3 weeks before requesting the break. The metadata didn't lie. While I'd been telling Dorian I needed space to find myself, I'd already been actively shopping for his replacement. The timestamps on my initial app installations, cross-referenced with my text message history, revealed a pattern of premeditation that would later be characterized in court documents as calculated deception and fraud. Even more damaging was the content of my messages with Grant, which had been automatically backed up to our shared cloud storage from day one. In black and white, I described my marriage as suffocating and Dorian as emotionally unavailable. I'd discussed my plans to test the waters during my break and see if I could find someone worth leaving for. Most damning of all was a message I'd sent to Grant just 5 days into my break. I think I've been planning this longer than I admitted to myself. Maybe the break was just my way of giving myself permission to do what I already wanted to do. Dorian's attorney was building a case that would later be described by the family court judge as one of the most thoroughly documented cases of marital abandonment and financial fraud in recent memory. But I was oblivious to the legal storm brewing in the background. I was too busy planning my new life with Grant, who had begun discussing the possibility of us moving in together once our respective divorces were finalized. I've been looking at some properties, he told me during one of our evening meetings. There's a great place in Riverside that would be perfect for us. 2 bedrooms, so Maya could have her own space when she visits. The casual mention of my daughter should have been a red flag. Grant had never met Maya, and I'd been careful not to introduce the complications of custody arrangements into our relationship. But instead of questioning his presumption, I was touched by his apparent willingness to include her in our future plans. You'd really be okay with having a 7-year-old around? I asked. Of course, he said, though something in his expression flickered. Kids are adaptable. She'll adjust. That night, I called my mother to check on Maya, something I'd been doing every few days to maintain the illusion that I was simply taking some time for self-care. How's my baby girl doing? I asked when Rosa answered the phone. She's fine, Miha, but she's been asking questions, my mother said, her voice carrying a note of concern I hadn't heard before. She wants to know why you and Dorian both need breaks at the same time and why she can't talk to you whenever she wants. What do you mean both need breaks? Dorian came by yesterday to drop off some of Maya's things. He looked terrible, Iseult, like he hasn't been sleeping. When Maya asked him when you were coming home, he just said that sometimes adults need time to figure things out. A chill ran through me. In all my planning and fantasizing, I'd somehow managed to avoid thinking about how my break was affecting Dorian. I'd told myself he was probably relieved to have the apartment to himself, free to work late, without worrying about family dinners or weekend plans. But if he looked terrible, if he wasn't sleeping, then maybe my absence was having a bigger impact than I'd anticipated. Did he say anything else? I asked. Just that he's been working a lot, some big project that's keeping him busy. Rosa paused. Iseult, are you sure this break is a good idea? Maya needs stability, and this whole situation feels what? Complicated. More complicated than you're telling me. After I hung up, I stared at my phone for a long time, Grant's arm draped across my shoulders as we lay in yet another hotel bed. For the first time in 3 weeks, I felt a flicker of doubt about what I was doing. But the doubt was quickly overwhelmed by Grant's reassurance and the intoxicating promise of a life where I felt valued and desired every single day. I had no idea that Dorian's big project was the systematic documentation of my betrayal, or that his sleepless nights were spent building an airtight legal case that would soon turn my fantasy of freedom into a nightmare of consequences I'd never imagined. The 4th week of my break felt different. There was an urgency to everything now, a sense that decisions needed to be made and futures needed to be planned. Grant and I had started talking about practical matters, when we'd tell our respective spouses that our marriages were over, how we'd handle the logistics of divorce, what our life together would look like once we were free to be open about our relationship. I think we should just rip the Band-Aid off, Grant said as we shared breakfast at a cafe near his office. Tell them both this weekend and start the process officially. I stirred my coffee nervously, the reality of what we were planning finally hitting me. It's going to be messy. Dorian's going to want to know how long this has been going on, and Maya's going to be confused and upset. Kids are resilient, Grant said, the same dismissive tone he'd used before when discussing my daughter. And as for Dorian, does it really matter what he thinks at this point? You're not happy with him. You haven't been happy for years. That's not your fault. He was right, of course. I'd been emotionally checked out of my marriage long before I'd met Grant. The break had just given me permission to act on feelings I'd been suppressing for months. Besides, Grant continued, it's not like you planned for this to happen. Sometimes you just meet the right person at the right time. Except that wasn't entirely true, and we both knew it. I had planned for this to happen, at least subconsciously. The dating apps, the carefully crafted profiles, the immediate progression from online flirtation to physical intimacy, none of it had been accidental. That afternoon, I made a decision that felt both terrifying and liberating. I called Dorian. "Hi," I said when he answered on the first ring. "How are you?" "I'm fine." His voice was neutral, professional. "How's your break going?" "Good. Really good, actually. I've been doing a lot of thinking, and I wanted to talk to you about some things." "What kinds of things?" I took a deep breath. "I think when I come home next week, we need to have a serious conversation about our future, about whether this marriage is really working for either of us." The silence on the other end of the line stretched so long, I wondered if the call had dropped. "Dorian, are you there?" "I'm here," he said finally. "And yes, I think we definitely need to have that conversation." Something in his tone made me uneasy, but I pushed the feeling aside. "I know this is probably hard to hear, but I think we both know we've been going through the motions for a while now. Maybe it's time to be honest about that." "Honesty is important," he agreed. "I've been thinking a lot about honesty lately." "Good. I'm glad we're on the same page." I felt a rush of relief. Maybe this would be easier than I'd expected. Maybe Dorian had been having the same doubts about our marriage that I'd been having. "When you say you've been thinking," he said, "have you been thinking alone, Or have you had help working through these feelings? The question caught me off guard. What do you mean? I mean, have you been talking to someone? A therapist, maybe? Or a friend? I thought about Grant, about the hours we'd spent analyzing my marriage and discussing my options. I've talked to some people, yes. It's been helpful to get outside perspectives. I'm sure it has been. Again, something in his tone made me uncomfortable, but I couldn't pinpoint what it was. Dorian, are you okay? You sound strange. I'm fine, Iseult. Just processing everything you're telling me. It's a lot to take in. I know it is, but I think if we're both honest, we'll admit that we've been drifting apart for a long time. Maybe this break has just made it obvious. Maybe, he said. Well, I should let you go. I'm sure you have things to do. Okay, I'll see you next week and we can talk more then. Yes, he said. I think next week is going to be very illuminating for both of us. After I hung up, I felt unsettled in a way I couldn't explain. Dorian had been almost too agreeable, too calm. I'd expected more emotion, more resistance to the idea that our marriage might be ending. Grant, however, was thrilled by my report of the conversation. See, I told you he'd be reasonable about this. He probably wants out as much as you do, but was too afraid to say it first. That made sense. Dorian had always been conflict avoidant, more likely to withdraw than to fight. Maybe his calm response was just relief that I'd been brave enough to voice what we'd both been thinking. What I didn't know was that Dorian had been expecting my call. His attorney had advised him that I would likely reach out during the final week of my break, either to extend the separation or to begin divorce proceedings. They'd coached him on how to respond, calmly, without anger, and in a way that would encourage me to reveal more information about my intentions. They'd also advised him to record the call, which was legal in our state, as long as one party consented. My admission that I'd been talking to people about our marriage, combined with my suggestion that we'd been drifting apart for a long time, would later be used to support their argument that I'd been planning to end the marriage well before requesting the break. More importantly, what I didn't know was that Dorian's attorney had spent the past week preparing the most comprehensive divorce filing in the firm's history. The petition, which ran to 47 pages when including exhibits, documented every dating app installation, every message exchange, every hotel booking, and every dollar spent on my journey of self-discovery. The financial analysis alone was devastating. In 4 weeks, I'd spent $890 in marital funds on premium dating app subscriptions, restaurant meals in neighborhoods I had no business being in, hotel rooms I'd booked during hours when I was supposed to be in self-care mode, and a complete wardrobe makeover designed to attract male attention. Every expense had been automatically categorized and tracked through our shared banking system. Every location had been cross-referenced with Grant's work schedule and my dating app activity. The timeline they'd constructed told a story of calculated deception that would later prompt the family court judge to use words like fraud and abandonment in his final ruling. But I knew none of this as I spent my final week of freedom planning a future with Grant that would never materialize. I was too busy choosing paint colors for the apartment we'd never share and fantasizing about the life we'd never build together to notice that my husband had just finished constructing the legal framework that would destroy everything I thought I'd gained. The trap was set. All that remained was for me to walk into it. The morning of my return, I woke up with a mixture of excitement and dread. 30 days of freedom were ending, but in my mind, they were also the beginning of something much bigger. I'd spent the previous evening with Grant, making final plans for how we'd handle the next few weeks. Remember, he'd said as we lay together in what had become our regular room at the downtown Marriott, you don't owe Dorian any explanations beyond the fact that you want a divorce. Don't let him guilt you into staying in something that isn't working. I'd nodded, feeling strong and resolved. I was 33 years old, and I deserved to be happy. I deserved to be with someone who made me feel alive and desired and appreciated. If that meant ending my marriage to a man who'd never really understood me, then that was a price I was willing to pay. The drive back to our apartment felt surreal. Everything looked exactly the same tree-lined streets, the same familiar landmarks, the same parking garage where I'd left my car a month ago when Dorian had dropped me off at my extended stay hotel. But I felt like a completely different person than the woman who'd left here 4 weeks ago. I used my key to enter the building, took the elevator to the 4th floor, and walked down the hallway to apartment 4B, the home I'd shared with Dorian for 3 years. I slid my key into the lock and turned. Nothing happened. I tried again, thinking maybe the lock was sticking. Still nothing. The key wouldn't turn at all. Confused, I examined the lock more closely and realized it had been changed. The brass finish was slightly different, and the keyhole was a different shape than I remembered. My heart began to race. I knocked on the door, softly at first, then more insistently. "Dorian, it's me. I'm back." Silence. I knocked again, louder this time. "Dorian, I know you're in there. My key doesn't work." Still nothing. I pulled out my phone and called him. The call went straight to voicemail. I tried again, with the same result. Panic was beginning to set in. I walked back down the hallway to Mrs. Chen's apartment, an elderly neighbor who'd always been friendly to Maya and me. "Mrs. Chen, it's Iseult from 4B. I'm sorry to bother you, but I'm locked out of my apartment. Have you seen Dorian today?" Mrs. Chen opened her door and looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Oh, hello, dear. No, I haven't seen him today, but there was quite a bit of activity over the weekend. Men moving boxes, that sort of thing." "Moving boxes?" "Yes, and a locksmith came on Monday. I assumed you were renovating or something." My stomach dropped. "Did Dorian say anything to you about renovations?" Mrs. Chen's expression grew uncomfortable. "Well, no, dear. Actually, he mentioned that you wouldn't be living here anymore. I assumed that meant you'd found a new place together." I thanked her and walked back to my apartment door, my mind racing. I tried calling Dorian again, and again it went to voicemail. This time I left a message. "Dorian, I don't know what's going on, but I'm standing outside our apartment and my key doesn't work. Please call me back immediately." 20 minutes later, my phone buzzed with a text message from Dorian. "Check the storage unit, Unit 247 at Secure Space on 5th Street. Code is Maya's birthday." I stared at the message, trying to process what it meant. Then I noticed there was something taped to our apartment door that I'd missed before. A white envelope with my name written in Dorian's careful handwriting. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a brief typed message. "Iseult, your break is now permanent. Divorce petition filed 11/15. All future communication must go through my attorney, Jennifer Walsh at Walsh & Associates. Contact information below. Your personal belongings have been moved to storage unit 247 at Secure Space on 5th Street. The lease on this apartment has been transferred to my name only. Dorian." I read the note 3 times before the words sank in. Divorce petition filed. Attorney. Storage unit. My hands were shaking as I called him again. This time, he answered. "Hello, Iseult." "What the hell is going on, Dorian? What do you mean divorce petition filed?" "I mean exactly what the note says. I filed for divorce 2 weeks ago. The papers should be served to you officially within the next few days, but I wanted to give you advance notice." 2 weeks ago, but we just talked last week, and you seemed fine with everything." "I was fine with everything. I was fine with you being honest about wanting to end our marriage. I was also fine with being honest about my response to that." "Your response? What response? You can't just lock me out of my own apartment." "It's not your apartment anymore. The lease was in my name, and the landlord agreed to remove you as an authorized resident. You'll need to find somewhere else to live." I felt like I was in a nightmare. "Dorian, we need to talk about this in person, like adults. You can't just make unilateral decisions about our entire life together." "Actually, I can. And I did. Everything you need to know is in the petition, which your attorney will receive shortly. I'd recommend you get an attorney, by the way. You're going to need one. Why would I need an attorney? We can work this out between ourselves. The silence on the other end of the line was so long, I thought he'd hung up. Dorian? Iseult, he said finally, his voice carrying a tone I'd never heard before. You really don't understand what's happening here, do you? I understand that you're being vindictive and childish because I was honest about our marriage having problems. No, he said, you're not understanding me. This isn't about our marriage having problems. This is about what you did during your break. All of it. Every single thing you thought you were hiding. The bottom dropped out of my stomach. I don't know what you're talking about. Your iPad, Iseult. It syncs to our home network. Every app you downloaded, every profile you created, every message you sent. I have all of it. Screenshots, timestamps, location data, financial records, everything. I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. Did you really think I wouldn't find out? I track digital fraud for a living. I specialize in finding information people think they've hidden. And you left a trail a child could follow. Dorian, I can explain. No, he said, cutting me off. You can't. There's nothing to explain. The evidence speaks for itself. 8 months of planning, Iseult. 8 months of dating apps and secret messages and hotel bookings, all while you were pretending to be a loving wife and mother. 8 months? That couldn't be right. I'd only been on the dating apps for 4 weeks. That's not true. I only started the apps during my break. The metadata says otherwise. Your first Tinder account was created on March 15th. Your break started on November 1st. That's 7.5 months, Iseult. 7.5 months of lying to my face while you planned your exit strategy. I tried to think back to March, tried to remember when I'd first downloaded the apps. Had it really been that long ago? The timeline felt fuzzy, confused. Even if that's true, I said desperately, we can still work this out. We can go to counseling. We can... Read the petition, Dorian said. All of it. Every exhibit, every timeline, every financial record. Then ask yourself if you really think there's anything left to work out. The line went dead. I stood in the hallway outside what used to be my home, holding a phone that had just delivered the most devastating conversation of my life, and tried to understand how everything had gone so wrong so quickly. 30 days ago, I'd walked out of this building feeling like I was finally taking control of my life. Now I was homeless, facing a divorce I hadn't initiated, and apparently in possession of evidence that could destroy me in ways I didn't even understand yet. I needed to call Grant. I needed to tell him what was happening and figure out how we were going to handle this together. But when I dialed his number, something I'd never experienced before happened. It went straight to voicemail without ringing. I tried again. Same result. A terrible thought began to form in my mind. I opened my text messages and scrolled to our conversation thread. The last message I'd sent him was from the night before. Heading home tomorrow morning. Will call you after I talk to Dorian. He'd never responded. I tried calling one more time, and this time, a recorded message played. The number you have dialed has been disconnected or is no longer in service. Standing alone in the hallway of a building where I was no longer welcome, I realized that in the span of 30 minutes, I'd lost my husband, my home, and the man I'd thought I was going to build a new life with. The trap hadn't just been set, it had been sprung, and I was caught in it completely. The divorce petition arrived by certified mail 3 days later, delivered to the storage unit facility, where I was now essentially living out of cardboard boxes. 47 pages of legal documentation that read like a forensic autopsy of my marriage, my character, and my complete lack of understanding about how thoroughly I'd destroyed my own life. I'd found a lawyer, a tired-looking man named Robert Stern, who specialized in difficult divorce cases, and had agreed to represent me after I'd explained my situation and paid his retainer with money borrowed from my mother. When he called me after reviewing the petition, His voice carried the tone of someone delivering a terminal diagnosis. "Iseult, I need you to understand something before we go any further," he said. "This is not a typical divorce case. Your husband has built what amounts to a federal-level investigation into your activities. The evidence he's compiled is comprehensive." I was sitting in the cramped office space at the storage facility, surrounded by boxes of belongings that represented the remnants of my former life. How comprehensive? 8 months of dating app activity, screenshots of 127 different profiles you viewed or matched with, complete message logs from 14 different men, including explicit discussions of your plans to leave your marriage, financial records showing $890 in marital funds spent on dating-related activities, hotel bookings that correspond exactly with your text message timestamps, and GPS data that places you at specific locations during times when you told your husband you were elsewhere. Each item on his list felt like a physical blow. But some of that has to be inadmissible, right? He was spying on me. Actually, no. Everything was obtained legally. Your iPad was syncing to a shared family cloud account that he, as the account holder, had every right to monitor. The financial records are from joint accounts. The location data comes from a phone plan he pays for. And the dating app information was subpoenaed directly from the platforms after he filed the initial petition. What about Grant? What about his testimony? Stern was quiet for a long moment. Iseult, there's something you need to know about Grant Kessler. He's married, as you knew, but what you didn't know is that he's also been under investigation by his employer for using his building access to facilitate inappropriate relationships with female gym members. You weren't the first. The words hit me like ice water. What do you mean I wasn't the first? I mean he's done this before, multiple times. His employer became suspicious when they noticed patterns in his access logs. He was entering the gym facility during off hours and on weekends when he had no legitimate maintenance work scheduled. When they investigated, they discovered he'd been using his position to approach women who appeared to be going through relationship difficulties. I felt sick. How do you know all this? Because he's been subpoenaed as a witness in your divorce case, and his employer has provided a sworn statement detailing their investigation. He's also been terminated and is facing potential criminal charges for misuse of his position. The room was spinning. Everything I'd thought was real. Everything I'd believed about Grant and our connection had been a lie. I'd been a mark, a target, just another vulnerable woman he'd manipulated for his own entertainment. There's more, Stern continued. His wife has filed for divorce as well, and she's named you specifically in her petition as a contributing factor. She's also threatening to sue you for alienation of affection. Can she do that? In this state, yes, and given the evidence your husband has compiled, she'd have a very strong case. I buried my face in my hands as Stern explained the worst news. Dorian was seeking primary custody, and the evidence made his case brutal. The court would weigh my month-long absence, the lies about a self-care retreat, and the money I spent on someone else. They even had texts proving I misled my mother, plus a counselor's notes about Maya's distress. I sobbed until my chest hurt. Stern said our options were thin: negotiate to limit financial damage and salvage visitation. At mediation, Dorian sat stone still while his attorney laid out timelines, profiles, receipts, and messages, cold data that erased every excuse.